So this is question 6 for week 2, and it looks at a business applications and economics concept of supply and demand, which is a very important concept, something that we're going to be looking at this week and also in later weeks when we look at consumers and producers surplus. So the idea of supply and demand, of course, is that producers will produce enough supply to meet consumers' demand and to find that balance where the producer isn't left with leftover items produced, and of course the consumer is not left wanting for items that aren't available due to low supply. So the question reads, suppose the demand and price for a certain brand of shampoo are related by, and it gives us this function here, P equals 16 minus 5 quarters Q, where P is the price and Q is the quantity demanded. So this is going to be your demand function. Part A asks us to find the price for a demand of 4 units. So we're going to use that demand function, and we have P is equal to 16 minus 5 quarters Q. If you don't like fractions, you can convert them to decimals, so equivalent value in decimals. So 5 quarters would be 1.25 as a decimal. But you need to be careful that you have a terminating decimal. Otherwise, you're going to be introducing some error depending on how many decimal places you're using. But here we've got a terminating decimal, 1.25, so this should work out fine. And for part A, we're going to be substituting for Q for 4 units and finding out what the price would be. So 16 minus 5, that's going to be 11. So we're looking at a price of $11 for a demand of 4 units. Part B says, suppose the price and supply of the shampoo are related by P equals 3/4 Q. Now this is our supply function, and it says find the supply when the price is $20. So we have P is equal to 3/4 Q. Now in this case, we're not given the quantity, we're asked to find that quantity supplied where the price is $20. So we're going to divide both sides by 3/4, and again, if you don't like working in fractions, you can convert the fraction here to an equivalent decimal, which would be 0.75. And either way, you're going to be dividing both sides by that amount. So Q is going to equal 20 divided by 3/4, which will give you a value of 80/3. And of course you would divide that to find your number, and it will be 26.67. So we're looking at 27, which would be the supply when the price is $20 Canadian. You can't have 2/3 of an item, so you'd have to have round that up to a whole item of 27. Part C and D look at determining the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price. And I'll look at that on the next page. But equilibrium means that place where the supply and demand are equal, meaning the producers have supplied enough product to satisfy the consumer's demand. And literally, to find the equilibrium quantity and price, you're finding that place that the supply and demand functions have in common, that place where they would share a point. So let's have a look at that. So when supply equals demand, we have what we call equilibrium. Things are equal. And so to find that equilibrium or shared point for quantity and price, you would set the supply and demand functions equal to each other. So we have our supply function, and we have our demand function, and we are setting them equal to each other. P equals this, P equals this, and we're setting them equal to each other. So 3/4 Q to 16 minus 5/4 Q, and we're trying to determine the value of Q at equilibrium. So we have two Q terms. We're going to combine those by adding 5/4 Q to both sides. So on this side we have 8/4 Q, and we have 16 over here. And 8/4, of course, we know is 2. And so here we have Q is equal to 8 at equilibrium. So to find our equilibrium price, we're going to take this value of Q and substitute it into either the supply or the demand function. And in this case, I'm going to probably choose the supply function because it's well, it requires less operational work. So P equals 3/4 Q, where Q is 8. And I know that 3/4 of Q is 3/4 of 8 is 6. And so that would be our price at equilibrium. So our equilibrium point in this case would be 8 and 6.